So hi, I'm Don Tinney, a high school English teacher from South Hero, Vermont, and currently your Vermont-NEA president. Happy to be here today with Molly Gray, who is running for Lieutenant Governor. Welcome. And to get our conversation started, could you tell us a little bit about why you're running for Lieutenant Governor?
Absolutely, Don, and thank you so much for inviting me to come on to a Zoom call. And thanks to Jeff and to Colin, and particularly to all of our incredible educators across Vermont. I'd have to say that I've had so many conversations with elementary school teachers and high school teachers. You are the heart and soul of our state, and our hearts go out to you for all that you've done, especially over the last 3 or 4 months. So I'm running for Lieutenant Governor because Vermont is at a crossroads, and we know that not only because of COVID-19, but because of the massive demographic challenges we've faced over recent years. And I think it's not enough to pay folks $10,000 to move from out of state into Vermont. We have to address what it is that makes Vermont special, makes it welcoming, makes it more equitable, makes it prosperous, sustainable, and resilient for the future. We've been stalled in Vermont on equal access to childcare, on equal access to healthcare, on education, broadband and internet access, bold action on climate change, caring for our families through paid family and medical leave, and the list goes on. And now more than ever, I think we have to elect leaders who share our Vermont values of hard work and care for our communities. And a little bit about me. I was raised on these values. I was born and raised in Newberry, Vermont, on a vegetable and dairy farm that's still run by my family today. I'm a very proud product of Vermont's education system, a graduate of Newberry Elementary School, which is still on our town common, Oxbow High School, the University of Vermont, and also Vermont Law School, where I teach today at night. I teach international human rights law. In 2006, I helped elect our Congressman, Peter Welch, and then moved to Washington to run his office, where I worked hard to strengthen and maintain our relationships with the Vermont-NEA and other workers and employee unions across the state. And then I went on to work for the International Committee of the Red Cross in the conflict zones worldwide, working to promote humanitarian assistance and addressing our greatest needs in crisis. Over the last decade, I've worked and lived across Vermont and served as an assistant attorney general statewide. And I'm running for Lieutenant Governor because I have the experience that we need in this moment to take us forward so our rural communities thrive, including our schools and our teachers and all of the jobs that we need for our communities to be whole, so that we're the best place to raise and support families from infants to elders, and including caring for our older population, and that we're able to take care of the land and environment that's taken care of us, which includes bold action on climate change and addressing food insecurity. So I feel I have the qualifications, the experience, the background to be a strong advocate for the Vermont-NEA and to serve you well as your next Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you. And moving to a very current topic, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your views about the reopening of schools this fall.
I think it's a moment where we have to be honest about what our schools offer our children and our students. It's so much more than reading, writing, and arithmetic, which is incredibly important. We will address that. But having talked to my aunt, Marion Mumford, who teaches kindergarten in Richmond, to Stephanie Miller in Colchester, who teaches 5th grade, and to high school teachers across the state, what we've known and now what we've seen very, very clearly in the last several months is that our schools provide a social network, a framework. They provide health, safety, food, the real structures that we need for our students to be able to thrive in the classroom. So as we think about reopening, it's not enough, I think, to say, oh, we're going to give our teachers some general guidelines. And I recognize that there are 25 requirements and that the task force that the NEA has worked with and on have come out. But I would certainly agree that we need a commission right now to think about what does it actually mean to provide a safe and healthy learning environment for our students, and how can we work collaboratively locally and statewide to ensure that all the support services are available. You know, it's PPE, it's more nurses, it's testing, and what does that look like? It's ventilation. You know, it's really outrageous that we haven't invested in the infrastructure of our schools in nearly a decade. It's also thinking about what is it going to mean for our students, and particularly those students who have had no access to some of the support services, or at least diminished access because of a lack of access to broadband and internet. And let's recall that a fourth of Vermont doesn't geographically have access to the internet today, and 1 in 3 students in Newberry, where I grew up, haven't had access to the internet. So what does it mean for our students coming back into an environment where there may be significant learning gaps? There may be a lot of trauma related to COVID-19 and what that's been like. And is there a need to do sort of a kindergarten assessment? Where are our students at? How do we support those needs? And then how are we prepared to adapt and to kind of bring students back up to where they need to be to thrive and to do well? But all that is to say that our teachers deserve our every support, funding, policies, training, guidelines, PPE, and the list goes on, and that has to be a priority.
Thank you. And as Lieutenant Governor, how will you address systemic racism and inequity in all of Vermont's institutions?
I want to begin by talking about inequity. What COVID-19 has exposed is that we have deep, deep, deep inequity in Vermont. And we knew that previously, but I think it's right there, right before us in this moment. And I want to talk a little bit about broadband and internet access. I want to talk about food insecurity, and then what it is that we invest in as a state, and how do we align our greatest needs with our budget and our priority. So, you know, what we do know from COVID-19 is that at some point in mid-March, our schools closed, and our teachers, our incredible teachers, had to rapidly readjust curriculum, thinking about how to continue to access students. Yet, as I said, 1 in 3 children in Newberry, where I grew up, still do not have access to the internet today. So if we're going to talk about equity, we also have to talk about how do we level the playing field to ensure that children have equal access to education. It is outrageous to me that in 2020, we don't think about access to the internet in the same way that we think about heat and water, that we have to address our basic human needs and to think about broadband as being one of those. So that's one. 2, schools are where we can level the playing field for our children. As a prosecutor who's worked statewide across Vermont, has led investigations, I know when I open a file where we've invested in incarceration and policing, but we've failed to invest in giving students real opportunity at the outset. So if we're going to invest in equal access to opportunity, in prevention, that means investing in childcare. It means investing in early childhood education, not private for-profit prisons or a prison system. It means investing in our educators. So I think that's in broadband, thinking about investments, moving investments away from downstream into upstream services in support, making sure that, again, our teachers have access to all of the resources that they need, and ensure that our parents, our students, that we do a real needs assessment and put emphasis there. When it comes to racial justice and addressing the injustices, you know, we know in Vermont, because we have the data, that we have an uptick in bias incidences in the state. We know from talking to our teachers and talking to students. I was talking to a high school student the other day who said, "Molly, what are you going to do to address racism in our schools?" So I think it's multi-pronged. One, I think there's cultural awareness and training that needs to happen and continue to happen. Training on bias incidents, training on implicit and explicit bias, to be able to address it, both for our teachers, our communities, our superintendents, you know, maybe bringing parents and children into a community conversation. What does that look like? And I think there's an area where we could do a lot more there. its curriculum. I think Act 1 was a step in the right direction, but there's more that we can do to think about implementation and also giving our teachers the support they need to diversify the curriculum. And then finally, saying as a state, we have reporting mechanisms in place so as incidences occur, we can collect the data and address them quickly. And I think that there are some things that we're doing well, but we're certainly not doing enough. And as someone who teaches international human rights law, who spent my career fighting for social justice, fighting for human rights, I look forward to using the Lieutenant Governor's office to advocate for more support, more training, more education to ensure that there are no cases of racism in our schools in Vermont, and that we can truly get to the bottom of the deep inequity that exists.
Thank you. And in our final minute, any thoughts you'd like to share with us?
I've had a lot of students talk to me about the personal learning plans, the PLPs, and I think it's an incredible opportunity we have in the state to think about how do we create more of a pipeline from our classrooms with our incredible educators to our communities in terms of continued education, workforce development. And this is an area where PLPs might be better promoted across the state. We might provide better support to our teachers and implementing them, creating more excitement for our students, and then thinking about how do we create more skills through the PLPs that students can use to build their expertise and to build the kind of workforce development needs that they may want or needs to go to college. So I'd like to talk more about PLPs at some point, but I guess I'll end by saying I look forward to being an incredibly strong and vocal advocate for the Vermont-NEA, for our teachers, and to serving you extremely well as your next Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you, Molly Gray. And on behalf of my fellow 13,000 members, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us, and we'll see you on the campaign trail.
Sounds good. Thank you, Don.
Thank you.